makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Okay, folks, I have a funny one today. This is a pair of threads that I saw on Twitter that I found absolutely hilarious because it's basically two tech douchebags who, without knowing it, or perhaps knowing it, are making a case for socialism, despite the fact that they never dare say the S word. So let's read this because it is insane. I don't think I've ever seen anything remotely like this, but here we go. Legion. She is an investor in Atelier Venture, so I guess she's a venture capitalist. Uh, hustle stack, means of creation, blah blah blah. Yeah, you get the type, right? The biggest opportunity of our time is to reconfigure the relationship between capital and labor. Hmm, where have I heard this before? I don't know. Sounds a bit like stuff that this guy may have written, perhaps. Anyway, I'm going to show you this thread, which is really the long one. Let's stop celebrating creator funds, incremental creator features, and shallow rhetoric about creator empowerment. All these things will fail to solve creators' economic precarity so long as we fail to fix the fundamental issue, which is ownership. Hmm, who spoke about ownership? Just saying. Ownership of the means of creation and distribution determines incentives, how wealth is created, who amasses it, and who earns income. Most important of all, ownership confers control of one's destiny, the ability to operate outside the whims of the select few. This is basically every single socialist structural critique of capitalism, like in a nutshell, in a tweet. No one, in fact, I congratulate her because few people could have basically written it in a single tweet. Just replace creation with production, and it's basically the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Ownership, therefore, is the original system condition from which all else flows. What's so funny about this is that they think they're reinventing the wheel. Like they think they're made this massive discovery that no one else ever spoke of before. Without ownership, creators are ultimately enriching and empowering someone else, platform owners, with their work. The value they create is fed back into a system that commoditizes and treats creators as disposable labor. Wow. Holy shit. Like I'm amazed. I am amazed. This is the best anti-capitalist thread I have ever seen. This is the best promo job that socialism has ever had in this environment. I swear to God. Like I probably could not have written a more lucid thread in favor of socialism than this. When creators use centralized platforms, they produce work that is uploaded to platforms and monetized however the platforms see fit. Platforms' revenue is sometimes divvied up and distributed to creators, but this is done on the platform's terms. Exactly the case. Workers do not have a voice and vote in how their the value of their labor is eventually redistributed back to them. This is pure socialism, pure unadulterated socialism. Yes, some creators are earning lots of income, while most earn very little, but ultimately, in even earning income, creators are creating even more value for the underlying platforms and for themselves, and feeding a flywheel that becomes ever more difficult to disrupt. Yeah, this is, again, who who could have thought of this before? And this bit is actually really important. The bit about yes, some creators are earning lots of income. So you may be earning a lot of money. You may have a job that you love, but you're still being exploited in capitalism insofar as you don't have a voice and vote in the redistribution of the value of your labor. That is a fact. This goes even for, like I said, even for very high earning people. So even an investment banker, and I hate to use the example of an investment banker, but even an investment banker is to some extent exploited because of his relationship with the capitalists in the investment bank, who decide how much of their profits are eventually given back to those workers. So again, I don't want to use the investment banking example. It's the most extreme, but it's true. And avoiding any discussion that the investment bank's profits on the whole are based on exploitation as well. I'm just simply referring to that single investment banker, he or she is being exploited because of their relationship under capitalism with how profits in that company are subsequently distributed. Creators by working are strengthening platform owners' domination over their ability to work. Giving creators ownership, both economic and political, can address a lot of issues around creator mental health, burnout, and anxiety around income instability. Being creator friendly stems from ownership. Again, how many articles have you seen in the last 5, 10 years drawing links between mental health and capitalism, or especially workplace practices, your alienation from your labor, the lack of rights that you have the moment you step into a workplace. Um, if politics for the last 150 years was defined by capital versus labor, we are now entering an era of platform versus participant. This is the same thing, the exact same thing. You're just changing words because you don't want to sound like you're actually giving Marxist analysis. That's what's so sad about this. Like, they realize what the problem is in capitalism, but they just refuse because of the freaking mind prison that they are in, that they refuse to admit that this is the same critique that's been given for the last 150 years. They just refuse to say that this is socialism, what they're asking for. They want to repackage it into some way that is, tech bro friendly. But it's socialism. That's what she is advocating, socialism in every single way. And at best, she's merely talking about one subsector of the economy that she's concerned about. But the fact is, it's the whole thing. This applies to every single industry. Yeah. Given the company's goals are to maximize profits, the management team sets policies that accomplish these goals. Amid slowing sales, the strategy is to shift more. Yeah, again, this is the standard leftist economic structural critique of capitalism. Yeah. Isn't the prevailing narrative of Silicon Valley that we live in a positive sum world where both sides can win, where Apple's goals are surely aligned with those of its developers and platform participants? See, again, this is arguing the case that in many respects, the economic system is a zero-sum game where someone's gain is another person's loss, which should be obvious. You can't be serious that you think that Jeff Bezos, his 177 billion, was an adequate reward for one-click shopping and one-day delivery. That's what he's invented. Are you telling me that is the appropriate reward that he deserves for this? Clearly not. Yeah. So that is pretty much, yeah. So what does this alternative future look like? Creators need to own the means of production and distribution. We have to turn creators, finally she's using means of production, that's good. We have to turn creators from commoditized labor into creator owners. Yep, good job, Legion. You've made the best case for socialism that I have ever seen on Twitter. Too bad your tech bro audience hates the S word and will never actually care about anything that you say when it comes, outside of this one particular subset of the market that you are targeting, the tech creator community. So Yeah. I mean, she's even mentioning things like the labor share of income. So she's done her research. I commend her for that. Side note, one of the major problems that contributes to growing wealth inequality is that those with capital have more leverage. They can earn more yield than those who are earning only via their labor. This is basically uh, a one tweet summary of Tomas Piketty's the book, the first one on capital. What was the name of it? Capital. I forget the name. Yeah, this is this is basically what Piketty argued, that income over time, that is the income generated by capital over time grows at a faster rate than the income generated by labor. That's why in the long run things like the stock market grows faster than GDP. Anyway, now we move on to another guy who responded to that original tweet, and this guy goes on a tour of economic history. So let's join me in this journey. Community capitalism. I wanted to wrap up the year by writing about something I've been thinking about for the past few months. So he's given this a lot of thought and clearly thinks that no one else, again, no one else has thought of any of this before. I'm trying to draw a line from inherited wealth of feudal lords to community-owned services with tokens. Okay. The last 1,000 years can be roughly split into two 500-year chunks, feudalism and capitalism. Feudal lords controlled all the land, farms, buildings, and capital. This was passed down inside families and never distributed to the workers. Capitalism totally changed that. Right, sure. That is why I guess the bottom 50% of families in the US own only 1% of all stock, none of which they actually hold directly. So this must be through like mutual funds or I don't know if this includes pension funds. I would think this is a very small number if it doesn't include pension funds, but anyway. What does the top 1% hold? 38% of all stock. Holy crap. The 10%, the top 10% hold 93% of all stock. How does this change? Like, how is this much different from feudalism in many ways? And I should note, the at least in a country like the US where stock is particularly important, um, the number of the your share of equity that each decile or each percentage of people hold is very reflective of your ownership of the means of production. Because if you think about it, the wealth that billionaires have, like Jeff Bezos, that 177%, sorry, 177 billion that he owns, that is from his share of Amazon. So billionaire wealth is almost entirely in the form of stocks. And you've also seen perhaps other quotes of like the top 10% own 80% of all wealth, but that often includes housing wealth. And that's a bit unfair because houses aren't really productive. I mean, you can do productive things with them. You can, for example, use them as collateral for a loan and then use that loan to start a business. But in terms of like when you say means of production, I think this is a much more accurate representation of who owns what in an economy like the US. Oh boy. So, risk, reward, and ruin were separated when joint stock companies became more common. The prerequisite for successful entrepreneurship shifted from inheritance to initiative. Inheritance still has a lot to do with this. And again, in a country like the US, which has one of the lowest social mobilities of any Western country, even more so. Bezos, contrary to what a lot of people like to think, that he was a self-made man, had capital from his family. On year two of Amazon's existence in 1995, he received 250,000 from his mother and father. That's a lot of money. Like, honestly, who on this planet, how many people on this planet are given $250,000 to help kick off their business? So don't tell me that inheritance didn't have anything to do with this. That is inherited. Anything that comes from your family is basically inherited. You did not produce it. He also benefited from a lot of family and friends, like extended family and friends, who invested in Amazon at a very early point, and they were given 1% of stock. And I think they were asked to give something like $50,000 for 1% of stock. All those people are billionaires now. So yeah, this chart I don't like because it gives a false impression of like how amazing growth has been uh, in the last century or so. But this is why you need to put a chart like this on a log scale, because it really, like, 0.1% growth at this point is probably much bigger than 10% growth here. So it makes it look so much higher. Um, Equity compensation kicked off in the 50s, but it really went into overdrive when it was mixed with high growth technology companies backed with high risk equity bets. Silicon Valley perfected the art. Employees at many most successful technology companies became owners. So this guy's confusing basically just like your standard uh, pay package based on like a certain percentage of your wage is paid in stock, and therefore you're an owner of the company. Um, this is not really like this is not how you make bucket loads of money. Um, Really, the way to make money out of stock ownership is to be one of the people who invested in it at the time of the IPO. That is how you make money. And obviously, this takes a lot of luck because clearly not every company that has an IPO is going to have Amazon or Google's growth rate. So it's a coin toss. And also, who has that much money to really, really, really make that much more money from it? Like you need a lot of extra money to be an investor, even to spare like $1,000 on a business that you've never heard of before on an IPO. That's still a pretty big risk. The SEC did two huge things this year. They raised the crowdfunding limit to 5 million and introduced a proposal to allow gig workers to receive the stock. Again, this is not a huge benefit for them because a lot of these gig workers will be in companies whose stock price has already, like, it's not going to grow at a huge rate anymore. Uber's stock price is not going to skyrocket anytime soon anymore. You were lucky if you were an original investor in Uber, that's where you made your money. It's not going to be the gig worker who now gets 10% of his earnings through Uber stock. He's not going to be a millionaire. That's not going to make him a lot of money. This is all BS. This is all BS. What was the greatest technology investment of the 2010s that was available to the general public? Answer: the Ether sale in 2014. Initial investors in that event who held on to 1,000 plus made 3,000 times their money. There's never been an event like this. This is exactly what I said. So if you were lucky enough to be an initial investor in any one of these companies or assets, you stood to make a lot of money. But ironically, this is something that I made a previous video on crypto, which I'm going to link at the end of this one. The more that crypto becomes mainstream, the less the huge growth that you see during these crypto bubbles is likely to happen. Like their price is going to stabilize. So there's less chance of people making this amount of money. The reason that they make this amount of money is because these are very, very volatile asset classes that have very high risk and therefore high reward. And the people who had this amount of money at the beginning to put into Bitcoin or Ethereum or Dogecoin, or take your pick which one, yeah, they made a lot of money. Those are the people, those are the charlatans and snake oil salesmen that are selling this on Twitter. Those are the Bitcoin bros on Twitter that you see. But it's the small investors. They're the ones who will have been convinced by the charlatanism of this and decided to invest at the peak of the bubble and then got wiped out. If you invested this $1,000 in Bitcoin or Dogecoin right before Elon Musk went on SNL, you've lost a good part of it, and probably like half of it. So, yeah, this is just snake oil. This year, the stock market was pushed to new heights during a pandemic where millions of people lost their jobs. The wealth gap is becoming a wealth gulf. I do not have all the answers to this problem. Well, that's funny because Lee did. um, Basically, all you're arguing is Marxist economics. So perhaps, maybe you should read Das Kapital. I do not have all the answers to this problem. My gut tells me that we need more people to become owners of technology. Yeah, owners of the means of production in general, not just technology. Own your fucking companies. That is how you reduce inequality in the long run. Because everything else that we do under capitalism simply patches up the inherent inequalities of capitalism, the inherent drive towards this inequality. That is why when you deregulate, when you lower taxes, when you basically reduce the counterweights to capitalism, like unions, for example, that's why this happens. That's why when we had all these restrictions, there was less income inequality. There were also less billionaires during this period for a reason. There's a direct parallel between how many billionaires there are, how high the stock market rises, and how much inequality there is. So this is why I think, like I said, things like unions, I think any leftist should be in favor of unions, but we have to also understand that it's not enough. Ownership of the means of production is the only permanent way in which we can have a fair system, a fair economic system. The sooner you realize this, the sooner you accept the need for worker ownership of the means of production, and the sooner that you realize the need for workplace democracy to be a permanent established, the main limitation of liberal democracy is that it stops the moment that you get to enter your workplace. Once you're in your workplace, you lose those rights. You still have some, but you lose, for example, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the right to vote for your leaders. All of that is lost. You're entering essentially a mini authoritarian state. So the quicker you realize how necessary worker ownership is and workplace democracy is, that is your first journey, your first step towards socialism. And he confirms it. Owning public stock in the digital services is not enough. We need to own the services themselves. Big technology companies have become more powerful than nation states. The community capital of the 21st century must be distributed as far as possible. I hope we will look back on the digital services of today in the same way we view the feudal lords of yore, these tyrants that control the digital land and force us to till their soil. There is so much amazing stuff to be built. Community capitalism is coming. No, dude. Socialism is coming. Yeah, again, this is all a call for socialism, not just owning public stock. Anyone under capitalism can own public stock, but that is meaningless unless you actually have a voice and a vote in how that company is run. And the only way to do that is through worker ownership. Not just individuals owning little bits of companies. In fact, most of you probably already own many companies in the U.S. Especially if you're older. If you're watching this and you're close to retirement age, which I'm not sure are most of my viewers, but just in case there are, you probably own. You and the rest of the people of your age own a lot of the companies in the U.S. Some of the biggest companies, like Amazon, I think is like 60% owned by institutional investors, which includes pension funds. Same with Google. I think Google is even more. Google is like 80%. So institutional investors own a big part of basically the US business sector. But you don't actually own it because you don't have voice and vote in that. Someone else, there's an intermediary that does it for you. Namely, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and the big institutional investors. So this is not democratic. And Thatcher, when Thatcher ran, she argued that privatizing state-owned firms would be more democratic because the public could own them. But again, this is why this is all false. And he recognizes this. That's what I think is amazingly hilarious about these threads. They're recognizing the hypocrisy of a lot of the basic building blocks of neoliberal capitalism. Owning public stock in digital service is not enough. Yeah, that's right. That's how it was sold. That's how the democratic nature of privatization was sold in the 80s. We need to own the services themselves. So, will this become our socialist utopia? Perhaps. Will we even get to this point before climate change destroys us? Something that the Bitcoin bros are not really keen on. So, I don't know. But still, this was a great lesson in Marxist economics from the least Marxist people on the planet. The Bitcoin bros, the tech douchebags. It's amazing how their critique of capitalism, how even they have a critique of capitalism that is indistinguishable from that of most leftists, and certainly most socialists. Yet they are, like I said, they're just so imprisoned by the dogma of capitalism itself, especially like free market capitalism, libertarian capitalism, I would say, which is pretty much the foundational ideology of Silicon Valley, that they just can't step out of it. They can't realize that they're advocating for socialism. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this. It was a good opportunity. I really need to make more videos on economics and kind of socialist ideas. I thought that was what I was going to specialize in, but then I realized I get so much more from Jimmy Dore videos. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this. And if you do, please like, please share, please subscribe, most importantly. And please don't put your life savings on Bitcoin or Dogecoin or any of these things. It's a scam. Just don't. Anyway, have a good day.